All right, Sherry and Lucas, welcome.
Thank you for having us. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you guys both here. I've enjoyed getting to know both of you in some of the work that we've been doing inside the Clarity Coaching Program. But I'm really excited to have you share more about your story today and how you've built this business and some of the lessons that you learned along the way. So you both decided we're going to get into the cannabis licensing business. So now you are a cannabis licensing consulting firm. Can you just explain what that means? And I think it's also important to put some context around this. That I mean, Canada, parts of the U.S., right? Cannabis is legal, whereas in certain parts of the world is not legal. So it'd be interesting if you could just kind of frame up what does cannabis licensing consulting actually mean? What do you do for people?
Right. So, just to, I guess, step back and talk a little bit about the framework in Canada. So, Canada has had, various iterations of regulations over time to allow people to use cannabis specifically for medical purposes and very uh, limited case by case occurrences. But and the government used to be the one that was providing cannabis to these patients. They would grow cannabis in very discrete locations, and then they would be the provider. Um, Eventually, that mind shift has shifted from the government, and they said, okay, let's outsource this and make it more accessible and create a commercial industry. So they did do that in 2013 and created a medical cannabis framework that was based on a commercialized industry where you could have license holders, so companies that are licensed to manufacture cannabis. Their activities that they're allowed to do at those facilities have evolved over time. It's really was first just like cultivating, and then it kind of eventually they were able to make oils, and then eventually it's evolved to what it is now, where you see a variety of products on the market. Um, but it was largely medical. And then in 2018, the Trudeau government decided to legalize, and then there was a revision to or a new enactment of regulations that came out, and it's the Cannabis Act and the cannabis regulations that allow um, individuals and companies to participate in the industry. So on a recreational front. So we still do have a medical framework in Canada, but we also have a recreational. And then these are the stores that you see out front, in different cities that have this like a standalone retail store, like an actual retail store where you could go in and buy product. So that's the retail chain. So in 2018, when it just so happened that's really around the time that this all kind of came together, and it was very serendipitous, I would say, because I just got to a point in my career when I was working for the private pharmaceutical company that I was, sort of like looking for other things, and this opportunity came. Um, and I was doing it really on the side on the weekends and just kind of saying, okay, well, I could help you with this. Let's get a retainer in place, and just started kind of formalizing something. And because there are a lot of legalities to what I was doing, it's in a regulated market. I really wanted to make sure that what I was doing was structured properly. So, I did get insurance. I did want to register a company name like right from the get go, because I didn't want to have any liability associated with any of that. So I was very proactive in that sense, right from the start.
Did you have interesting conversations with like family members or friends when they said, "Hey, so like, what are you doing? I haven't seen you in a while," or "What are you up to?" And it's like, "Yo, we're running a cannabis consulting company." Did that, like, how did that kind of happen?
I think, well, I would say my family, I feel like they never really know what I'm doing. No one else in my family's in science, so they just know that I do a lot of things, and maybe I'm smart. So they just kind of
Right.
trust what I'm doing. But no, and I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. So to them, they were like, okay, like this is interesting in you, and go and do it. I wish you luck, kind of thing. Right.
Does it say so? Today, you're helping companies whether they're looking to cultivate cannabis or they're looking to sell cannabis or some other product to license.
Yeah, so there's a variety of activities that are permitted under the Cannabis Act and regulations, which is that you could cultivate, you could process or manufacture, which can be anything from just packaging dried flower or, processing it further to make extracts or make edibles or topicals. Um, and so that's kind of where, my support kind of comes in, where I can help them complete the application that Health Canada requires. So it is regulatory. So there is an extensive application, that package that needs to be put together. And it doesn't only include a description of the activities, it's also the facility itself, because in Canada, in order to get the license, you actually have to commit to building out an entire facility and submitting evidence of the facility itself to make sure that it meets the security requirements, that it's built to a quality standard that makes sure that ensures that the quality itself is safe and there's integrity to the product, so it's going to be safe for human consumption. And a lot of thought goes into that, and know-how. And if you're not familiar with what's acceptable and what the regulation speaks to and how to translate that into practice, it could be quite complex.
Makes sense. Lucas, you wanted to add something, I think?
Yeah, just to build on it, I think one of the reasons why we were able to fill up part of the market where there was really just a gap was there was a huge need there. And there was a huge need there because the process was extremely mysterious for people. It was extremely dark, and there wasn't a very clear delineated process. So our regulator in Canada, Health Canada, they like to be very mysterious in the cannabis program. They don't ever use their name. They would just use a general signature, and they would ask you to email basically an inbox that was very poorly monitored that you would probably never get a response from. So the process in Canada, when Sherry and I started doing this, was people would have to wait approximately 2 years to get a response on an application. So you can imagine when you have investors who have put millions of dollars into your company, you're filling out an application, it's going into a pile, and you're like trying to explain to your investors that this is different than anything else you've worked in. You've given me all your money, and I need to hold on to this money, but we're not going to get a response for potentially years after submitting an application. We would come in because we would be able to have some connections at Health Canada. We knew these people because they were our friends, they were our colleagues that we worked with, but we also understood what this process would look like. So I think we were doing a little bit of not just the application running, but a lot of the counseling that comes along with being an advisor or a business coach, and telling people like, no, this is normal. Trust the process. It's going to work.
Right.
Especially if they're investing somewhere between $5 to $15 million in building out their facility entirely. The last thing you want to hear is that they didn't pass the zoning check that you had to do with municipality, and their location would be compliant.
So you're acting like the advisor, the Sherpa, guiding these clients and organizations. Let's fast forward then to today, so people have an understanding of what the business looks like in terms of number of clients you guys work with per year, number of team members, employees, just like anything you can share to give people a sense of what does the company look like today in terms of the size.
So yeah, in 2018, I mean, this company started at a kitchen table. It very quickly grew into something where we're like, in a couple of months, we're like, let's go to a co-working space. We worked in a co-working space for a couple of months. I quit my job selling digital textbooks pretty much like right away. And every few months, we were moving into a different, larger office in the co-working space. So it was like 1 employee, and then it was 2 employees, and then it was 5 employees. And then we've kind of been around the 10 to 20 employees, I think, for the last couple of years. And around the time when the world changed forever, we had acquired our own space because we were getting a lot of in-person meetings. So the company has changed a lot. It's grown relatively consistently for the first few years into the size that it's approximately at now, but our offerings have changed substantially.
We're going to talk about that. What would you say were some of the biggest challenges that both of you faced, the company faced in the early days of building the business? Like, just take me back to 2018, 19. I mean, when we talk about 2020, of course, we had COVID, so that I'm sure posed a series of challenges. But aside from COVID, what were some of the initial challenges or growing pains that you encountered?
COVID wasn't a challenge. We did really well during COVID, funny enough, because it was around the same time that cannabis was getting the green light, and it continued to get the green light until it was declared an essential service. Where the challenge happened for us was that it was a couple of things. One, we actually grew. We were extremely profitable, like right away, right out of the gate. Our first year, we made a little bit of money. Our second year, we made a lot of money. And then our third year, we made like a really good amount of money as a company. After that, the market shifted. So we were under the impression that like we are a company that's not going to be able to scale fast enough, right? We were just like, we need to hire more people. We need more
Right.
people and more seats, more people and more seats.
Yep.
And it was when the market shifted that we realized, okay, hang on a second. This is part of a boom. This isn't a bubble. The bubble's burst. And now, stuff kind of gets real after you realize that.
Yeah, and I would like to add to what Lucas said. Um, one of the advantages we had, and like unlike a lot of other companies when they start and they have to build up their credibility and their brand and everything, for us it was very quick because when I left the government, it was very rare and unusual because many people do not leave the government ever. So when people heard that I had left the government, it like spread like wildfire. And we got a lot of business out of that. We got a lot of recognition. There are a lot of events in cannabis. So we got speaking engagements like right away. We got media engagements. I was speaking on BNN Bloomberg for a very notable cannabis scandal that had happened for one of the companies. And I was on there like 5 times. So, and this is way before now where I feel like there's a lot of, webinars and social media presence. There was, but it wasn't as how it is now. So that really added to our reputation, our credibility, and we were able to leverage that. But I guess so like where Lucas is speaking to now, where things have turned, where we really faced our challenges was really after COVID, and the markets in Canada had cooled a bit, or I would say a lot, in cannabis. And we kind of, because we're consultants, we kind of had it was kind of like a ripple effect for us. We don't really feel the impact right away. The companies at the top kind of like start to struggle with money, and then eventually kind of goes down the chain where there's like, now we need to cut consultants, right? So we don't necessarily feel it right away. So it was a little bit delayed when we got the impact of it.
How did you navigate that? Because I mean, that's a very common thing, right? In any kind of new industry, a lot of money goes in, and then all of a sudden, like anyone thinks, oh, I can be successful. And then the reality sets in that there's probably going to be some players that don't survive for one reason or another. There's consolidation in the market. So when the market shifted, how did you respond to that? What did that actually mean for you?
A few things. Of course, it always impacts the bottom line. We start to look at our finances, like how can we make cuts to our expenses. It always goes back to staffing, unfortunately, as well. But we wanted to avoid that. We had a lot of great staff, and we knew that there was a lot of value with them, and that's we were trying to avoid that. So we had thoughts of expanding our service offerings. Right? What else can we offer to our clients to maybe make things add more value to them? So it's not necessarily like they're looking at the dollar and cents of cost, but it's like, how can we help you get out of whatever rut that you're in to help your business so that you could generate more money, and then we all make more money, right? And kind of phrasing it that way. So more of a long-term support that we could provide for them, coaching, helping them like go-to-market strategies, things like that for their products.
Have you built a consulting business only to find yourself feeling stuck? Are you tired of relying on referrals, struggling to bring in new clients while serving the ones you already have, and knowing you need to raise your fees but feeling overworked and spinning in circles under a revenue ceiling? The problem isn't your expertise, it's clarity. And that's why we created Clarity 2.0, our newly upgraded coaching experience. Powered by our ROI verified growth system, Clarity 2.0 is designed for one thing: real results. With coaching personalized to you and your business, proven consulting frameworks, intelligent AI-powered tools that accelerate your learning and amplify your results, and a curated global peer community, you'll finally gain the clarity, confidence, and control to take your business to the next level. And the numbers speak for themselves. Over 80% of our clients raise their fees, refine their niche, or reposition within 90 days. Many double their revenue in under a year. More than 1,000 consultants across 75 plus countries, from solo specialists to multi-7-figure boutique firm owners, have transformed their businesses through our methodology. And now it's your turn. Head over to consultingsuccess.com/grow and book your growth session call today. It's time to stop grinding and reacting and start intentionally leading your next level of business growth with Clarity 2.0. So instead of kind of hunkering down and just putting your head in the sand, or just making kind of big cuts, you look for ways of adding even more value to the market and to your clients as a way to kind of almost grow out of the problem instead of just only cutting. I'm sure you made some cuts, it sounds like, but that you were also thinking about growth and more value.
We had to go through a downsizing event, which I think was like very, very difficult. It was a very much a reality check to go, oh, okay, we can't sort of expand infinitely doing the same thing that we're doing. We need to make a few changes, right? So we looked at expanding our offerings and talking to people like, what problems are you trying to solve? Unfortunately, the answer didn't lie, with our current clients. The answer was elsewhere. So we really had to look at expanding our geographical reach and working in other markets.
Right. We're going to talk about that in just a couple of minutes here. When you look back, just, the benefit of hindsight, what's one thing that either one of you wishes that you would have known earlier that maybe would have helped you to avoid, a big setback, or would have maybe helped you to accelerate success, even faster than it did?
In retrospect, I would have been better at looking for some of the earlier signals in like a new business in a new industry. Um, I think the signals were definitely there, and I saw them in some of our our CRM reports, and I was looking at the number of opportunities being created every month, and the value of the opportunities was starting to decrease as well. Like there were signs there, and I thought maybe this is just a seasonality thing. The other piece was, I think, trying to grow too fast, too quick, thinking that this was going to be, at least a wave that was going to last probably a couple more years than it ultimately ended up doing. So those two things were the things that I wish that I had.
And Lucas, on that first one, do you remember how long before kind of the impact really happened that you started to notice that, are the number of opportunities or the value of the opportunities is trending downwards? Was that like a month before, 6 months before, 3 months? Like what did that timeline look like?
If I recall correctly, I mean, we were in a year where we were profitable, but we started to see some of these signals. I think it probably looked like about 6 to 8 months.
Okay. Good for people to know to pay attention to that. I mean, that's one thing I always try and pull out of these conversations on the podcast, as you guys know, that lessons that you learn can benefit others. So I appreciate the specifics there. And then Sherry, I don't know if this is a question for you or for Lucas, but you just touched on a moment ago, both of you, that you did make a geographic expansion. So you started the business in Canada, but then and today you are quite heavily in the U.S. market. So can you talk a little bit about, number one, why did you go to the U.S. market? I mean, is it just that it's a much larger market than the Canadian market? I mean, we understand that ourselves. Uh, so is it that? And also the other question is any complexities that you ran into? I think in the day kind of an age that we're in, people are very used to working with clients potentially, in different countries or halfway across the world. But the way that you guys operate in, for example, the US, may be a little bit different. I mean, you spend a fair bit of time. So can you just talk about any complexities or any maybe challenges that you had to kind of go through, and why you spend so much time in the US?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, we did make the decision to change or add a geographic location to our offering, really, because yes, we were working in Canada, but ultimately it really was drying up. Like, we couldn't justify staying in the market. And very similar to what happened in Canada, where there was a legalization event that was happening across the US at the same time. So you're seeing New York open, New Jersey open, Minnesota, Maryland. So our business, because we're primarily focused on licensing, and then like later on, there's the post-licensing support with compliance, but the real, you know, initial event is the licensing piece. That's kind of where we had to go and start following that train, through the US. In the US, they are not federally legal. So federally, you can't cross state lines with cannabis. But each state has the ability to make the decision if they want to legalize cannabis or not. So there are quite a good number of states now that have legalized, and we've seen a real uptick over the past 3 years in that. So we started initially in New Jersey, and that was hard for us on the operational side because one, we're very risk adverse. Like we almost intentionally hire that. We work in compliance and everyone is very risk adverse, I would say, and kind of like mentally analyzes the risk. We're like, okay, we're going to have to go to New Jersey. We're not from there. It's a totally different country. They're very litigious in the US. And, we have to become familiar with a whole new set of regulations, and we don't have boots on the ground there. So that was kind of hard for us mentally to feel comfortable with.
Why did you push forward? I mean, for a lot of people, when they would weigh those kind of risks, and especially for those that tend to be a bit more conservative, they might take some pause and go, no, let's just really focus on expanding in the Canadian market, or let's look at, some other market. Given that you tend to be a little bit more conservative or risk adverse to a degree, as you said, or, really analyze things and think about important things like compliance. Why did you guys decide, yes, let's actually go for this? And you really have gone for it.
Yeah, but I think that we also thought very logically about strategies to help protect ourselves. So we aligned ourselves with people like lawyers and law firms, right? Because in the US, in Canada, there are a lot of consulting companies that are non-lawyers the help with the applications. There are some lawyers, yes, but I would say the majority are non-legal firms like ourselves. But in the US, there are a lot of law firms that work on cannabis applications and just support that. That's just the way that they're set up. I don't necessarily, my personal opinion is that lawyers are not the best position to do that. They've never really even been in a facility and they don't have a quality background. So there's some limitations there. But they definitely know the legislation well. So they have that.
So that was sort of like our, I guess, our tipping point, because we would go and attend a few of these events. We would strike up these conversations with folks who work at law firms, and we're kind of in a sort of a similar space. There's a little bit of like a Venn diagram overlap area there, and that's how our break into those markets began. It was through the protection of working with a partnership
Yeah.
under a law firm.
And to add to that, we also have the advantage of working in an existing cannabis market, and a lot of people can't say that, right? A lot of the lawyers, they're confined to the state that they're in. That's where they're barred, and that's really where they can operate. And if that state has never had a legal framework before, they don't really even know what they're looking for. So, like, we also have that advantage. And like, we always like our value, really, like our mission is really to help individuals set up their business. Like that's what we're passionate about. We're passionate about helping entrepreneurs or run their business in a legal compliant way and to be successful. Like, we're entrepreneurs ourselves, and we come from, academic background. We love teaching and we love educating people, and it just like works really well. So we're like, we can help these people, to the best of our ability.
You definitely bring a very unique background and kind of set of experiences and expertise because of the work that you did, in science, in government, your education, and both understanding, right, the Canadian market, and then after that the US market. How important was it for you to align with other law firms or lawyers in the US, kind of entering that market? Because oftentimes people wonder, or I should say, maybe they don't take advantage enough of the opportunities to strategically align themselves with others in the ecosystem that could be complementary to them. But when you put those two skill sets together, right, it creates an advantage. That's kind of what you guys have done. Can you just talk a little bit about what you feel that has allowed you to do, or kind of positioned you maybe differently than others, and what's the impact of that?
Well, I think it was relatively short-lived. Once we started working with the law firms, we realized, sort of what this was like. We got used to the situation, the conversations, and even the clientele are extremely different, geographically speaking, with who we're normally dealing with. So the attitudes, the personalities might have been a little bit bigger, and a little bit more adversarial in some cases. But once we sort of had our feet wet, we were able to offer the same kind of thing, but without having to rely on a partner. I do feel the lawyer saw this as an opportunity to have someone act as an application mill writer, and just sort of pump these things out. We got the first one done, we got the confidence, and then we just started, rinsing and repeating after that, but without having someone sort of take maybe a bigger cut than what they're entitled to.
Yeah, I think it's important to explore potential partnerships and see how you could strategically align. But ultimately, if that doesn't work for you, then don't go ahead with it. But I think that it's important just to go through the exercise.
And so how are clients finding you today? Can you just kind of walk everyone through? I mean, I know we've had some conversations about this and what you guys are doing, which is quite a few different things. But just if you were to maybe rank like the top 3 ways of how you are generating business or building your pipeline, what would you say those kind of top 3 are?
So we didn't do any marketing when we first started the company. Like, literally, our phone just used to ring. We had a couple engagements that we would do with some groups who would go live on Twitter or X, and do webinars. But it was through website, and it was through people picking up the phone and calling us. One day when the phone stopped ringing and we had to move into the US, we completely had to revamp our strategy. Moving into the US, all the work we had done sort of marketing and creating a name for ourselves in the Canadian market, none of that actually translated into this new market. People want to buy local. They want to know that there's like a throat that they can throttle if things don't go well. So to be able to present ourselves in the US, we really had to create this persona that we are a US focused, US fronted entity. So our strategy there was to get offices in the US that were satellite, so at least had like some kind of boots on the ground place where we could conduct meetings, right? So we did that. Then from there, we were able to completely sort of rebrand and remarket our website. We had a tagline underneath our logo that was, Canadian Regulatory and Scientific Cannabis Consulting. Marketing that into New Jersey wasn't going to work. So we had to scratch that off. We tried global for a while, but then we really wanted to sort of play into, I think, a lot of the nationalistic tendencies that a lot of folks in the US kind of experience. So we're like, okay, well, we're America's #1 cannabis licensing company. That tagline was available. So we threw that underneath and changed our coloring to look a lot more like the New York Knicks or the Islanders sort of color scheme. So it was, I would say, very familiar in that sense. Now, it's come back to being web inbound and phone callers. But when we speak to people, a lot of them are saying, we're seeing a lot of the content that you're putting out on YouTube. We're seeing a lot of the webinars that you're presenting through, maybe through association with your partners. So the channels have kind of come back, and then the third one is the presence at trade shows. So going out to trade shows where entrepreneurs will go, prospective license holders or existing license holders will be at. We'll put ourselves in front. So people don't know to look for us. They have to find us. So we have to put ourselves in front of them, either through web content or by being there physically at a show.
So I'm hearing you say webinars, videos on YouTube, and then also boots on the ground, actually going to trade shows, conferences, events to meet people directly. Is that correct? Those three?
And
Yeah.
websites, yeah.
Yeah, websites. So we can't forget the SEO piece. That was extremely important. And we, we're very lucky to find someone and bring them into our marketing team, which kind of leads into the next part of the story, who was amazing at it. And we would, had to be #1 on every search that had the word cannabis in it and a state name.
Is that still true for you today? I mean, I know a lot of people have seen that landscape shift with the rise of AI, and the organic rankings that they used to have, are no longer, they might still have them, but let's say, amount of people that are just searching compared to those maybe hopping right onto AI to do some searches, has that impacted your business?
So obviously we have to rank optimize our SEO so we rank really high. But what that translates to is that when you're searching in an AI GPT, that we come up as one of the sources, right? And that's very often if you search cannabis, a question about cannabis, and you have all the information there, we show up as a source.
It'll source
So,
you, right? Okay, got it. I wanted to just dive a little bit deeper into the whole boots on the ground thing, because I know, Lucas, you especially spend a lot of time traveling. I mean, it's like, I think you just mentioned a couple of times, 2 weeks out of every month, or like you spend a lot of time, right, going to different trade shows and events. That's something that I know you said early on, like in a previous life, right, or previous kind of role, you really enjoyed doing that. Many people that I've talked to who have had careers like that, they get to a point in their life where it's like, it's so hard to do. They're so tired of it. They don't want to live out of a suitcase anymore. So I'd love to hear, how do you, first of all, feel about it, or what maybe allows you to continue to enjoy it? But the other part of my question is, how beneficial do you think that is, given that so much of what everyone is doing these days is focused on digital, it's online. But I've heard from you and others, and I think, we had a call about this in our group not too long ago, where one of the other successful consulting business founders mentioned that, he's actually another person. So one lady and one guy were both saying that they spend now, quite a bit of time meeting people in person, and how they found it to be very beneficial. But so I'd love just to kind of hear your logic or your experience of really prioritizing meeting people in person as opposed to only doing online, and kind of how that's all come together for you.
That's deeply rooted in, I think, a lot of our core philosophies and fundamental values that we have here at the company. So we still have a flagship office in downtown Toronto. We are professional dress in the office Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And I think that sort of stems from this piece. And I feel that, like, a lot of the folks that we're competing with probably also have similar values in terms of, lawyers, will take, they have a physical office, they'll take client meetings in person, and they're local. So we had to present ourselves that way, and to be able to do it that way, we have to be present at a lot of these events. I find specifically in New York, people want the option to be able to see that you're there. They want a physical presence there. When we were sort of starting off, before, we have the apartment in New York and the office in New York. What I used to do is I would take the 6 a.m. flight out of Billy Bishop from downtown Toronto, head to our New York office, get there around 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. I would have one meeting in that particular day, or maybe I'd be picking up a check or collecting a signature on a document and then bringing it back. And oftentimes, as this would happen, sometimes people would even call me up in the morning and be like, you know what, can we just do Zoom instead? It's this mentality of like, you are there and you're in New York, so I'm okay doing business with you.
Yeah.
That if I said I was in Colorado, California, they would say, you don't get this market. you're not a part, you're not a stakeholder here. You're not a resident here, or a citizen of this market in this part of the industry. So, there's a huge mental thing I think about buying local that is really important, and people want to have that business card. They want to see you at the trade show, and it really comes down to number of impressions. When I speak about impressions, I'm talking about number of times they see you at these events and these gatherings.
Right. That makes sense. Looking back, kind of at the business to this point, is there something that you feel has really helped your business more than anything else? I mean, maybe it's what you're referring to right now in terms of just that proximity and meeting people in person. Or I wonder, Sherry, is there something else that you feel like, yeah, making this decision, making this hire, taking this action, has benefited us so significantly?
It's honestly the culmination of everything that we've been discussing.
Okay.
It really is. No, it really is. Yeah, I mean, everything that Lucas says is true. I think that's critical to be flexible enough to, change the way that you do things to cater to your clientele. And if that means that, they want more in person, then you got to think about, like, does it make sense for me to have an actual office? Like, maybe the return on investment will be worth it. Right. So,
I mean, I find that comment interesting because, and I know, Lucas, you mentioned this as well, but a lot of people, when they would look at that, that opportunity, or just kind of consider, does it make sense for me to, never mind opening up an office in a different, city? I mean, you're opening in a different country, but beyond that, a lot of people would just look at even the idea of, uh, getting on a flight, booking a hotel, going to meet somebody, somewhere else, and they look and it's like, oh, the cost of doing that, it's not worth it. But here you are. I mean, you guys have really made significant investments into establishing that presence and establishing yourself. How did you, like, did you run the ROI on that? Did you do some calculation? Like, how do you think about, will it be worth it or not? Can you just kind of talk through that process? Because I think it might be helpful for others to see.
So this is a multi-component question, very, very loaded here. So we were very aware that the overregulation and the overtaxation in the Canadian industry was going to be the detriment of the industry. We still have a number of clients that are great, that we love working with, who are, based in the Canadian market and will continue to work with us, but that has, been decimated. The decision to move to the US was very much based on, one, population. Between New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, we have the population of Canada just in that tri-state area, which is excellent for us. All of them are experiencing a legalization event around the same time. But to be able to put ourselves at the top of the crowd, we just had to position ourselves in sort of a marketing standpoint as the number one choice to be able to do this and to be present. And it definitely is a risk, right? There wasn't anyone on the other side saying, if you do this, build it and it will come. This was like, I'm going to work harder. I'm going to, fly in more flights. I'm going to go and take more meetings than anybody else who's doing this. And I will win as a result of that because, I believe in the company. I believe in what Sherry and I are doing in terms of, like, the value that we provide to people. I really believe in that. And I'm also going to work harder than anyone else who's going to try it. So there's no way I could lose. So we've looked at the ROI. Now, if we look at our client portfolio, we have more clients that are US based than we do Canadian, by a good margin. And most of those US clients are based in New York. And, we're just seeing the tip of the inflection point for where New York's going. It's definitely been riddled with a lot of problems, a lot of regulatory issues. They recently just told 100 operators who are already open and operating that they need to move their store once they renew their license, which is like crazy. It rings back to what they did with the taxi medallions, I think, like 10, 15 years ago, where people were buying these medallions on some kind of, like, black market. And then, they would find that Uber was coming in, and then all these medallions were basically worthless. And people were, like, actually committing suicide. Similar things are happening in the New York market, because it's a very wild market. They say if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. And that was sort of the mantra that we had developed here in the company, is like, if we can establish ourselves in one of the toughest states to be able to establish a business or a company, then we can take that model and leapfrog into any other market as we follow this breath fire of legalization.
which is essentially what we've done. So, yeah, we've taken what we've learned in New York and New Jersey and have carried that through to other markets. Obviously, we've made some tweaks to that and have optimized it accordingly for the markets that we're in. But, essentially, we've gained the confidence and the know-how really to navigate the US market.
But it was risky, Michael. I mean, hey, like, there was a while there where we were losing. Like, there was one year where we lost hundreds of thousands of dollars on the books. We thought, if we don't commit to a movement now, we might as well pack it in and give up. And we just like, we've got such a beautiful thing that's built here, we got to try and, preserve it and to save it. And we did that, I think, largely through our own internal marketing game, through our presence game. But that also turned into sort of the next thing that, allowed us to be able to survive and to put forward, which is offering sort of a new service.
And we've worked so hard on our marketing. We really pride ourselves in the marketing that we put forward to the universe. And so much so that we now offer this service to clients as well. So we help them with their marketing and apply a lot of the strategies.
It's important to highlight that because I mean, what you have done is you can kind of consistently put your ear to the ground to identify what your current clients and the market wants beyond what you've been providing only to the current time. And that's led you to launch, new products, new services, new ways of creating value for the market and your clients, which is something that, is not always easy to do. People sometimes come up with new ideas, but those ideas don't go anywhere, or they're too hesitant to try and come up with new ideas because they fear change. But you've both been able to, to do that well and to continue growing the business. So that's fantastic. One thing that just also stands out to me is that, you both are really fit. You come across as being confident. It feels like sports or activity is part of your life. And I wonder how much of a role for each of you does kind of exercise or well-being or fitness play into your life, into your success and kind of mindset?
Well, we were both overachievers. And I think many people with overachieving A-type personalities do have the character trait of a lot of self-competition. So exercise, fitness is usually a part of it. There are a lot of runners who are entrepreneurs, who are CEOs and things like that. So yeah, I think that for myself, that it really helps me de-stress. And because I am like more of a high-strung personality, I work really hard, have a lot on the go all the time. And I think that really helps me with my own wellness, helps me decompress and, gives some time back to myself. And I do like the competition aspect of it. So I have run a lot of races. I run half marathons, competed in high rocks competition with Lucas very recently. And then we're signed up for another one in Boston. We did the high rocks in New York ending of May. And then we have high rocks Boston ending of September. It's a fitness.
Glad you asked, Michael.
What kind of competition is
Get
it?
that sign up bonus. So it's a race. It's a mixture of like high intensity interval training. So you have things like a rower, a sled push, a sled pull, a farmer's carry. But in between each of the exercise, you have to run a kilometer. So, you run a kilometer, you do an exercise. And mind you, like, I've got like the Apple Watch, I said it the last time I did it, and I didn't probably train as well as I should have for the first time. But I was basically in the red line the entire hour and 15 minutes that we ran the race. So it's probably the hardest thing I've ever done, but certainly a fun way to be distracted. So yeah, fitness.
I'm sure you feel great afterwards.
No, you don't. You feel
No, I mean, mentally you feel great that you've done it. Your body type.
You feel very accomplished.
a long time afterwards. Yeah, you're like, oh yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, which is funny because I think that's what a lot of people sort of when they reminisce about their experience with drugs, they don't remember if it was more fun actually doing the drugs or just reminiscing about the times they did them. But through it, as you're going through the event, the race, you're like, man, this is the worst thing I've ever done. This is not what I want to be doing.
I've done a marathon, so that's the worst thing I've ever done. Maybe if I ever do a triathlon, that might be the worst.
Yeah, the first time I experienced the runner's high, where my legs are in pain, my knees feel like I should just be giving up, and maybe I should stop and walk the rest of the way back. And then you just keep going, and you get to a place where like the pain dissipates, and all of a sudden you're not feeling it, right? You just can kind of keep going. When I had that breakthrough, I was like, wow, this is the power of the mind in comparison to the body, right?
That's
So
right.
the body can actually be so much stronger than the mind is obviously strong, but your body will send you these signals, but it can actually do so much more than you might think it can do if you allow it to. And I think there's a direct connection because I'm the same as you guys. I'm, at the gym often and running and being active. And I just think that it's so important to not only take care of your body and your health, but if you want to be successful in business, you have to be able to play the game. And the only way to play the game is to stay healthy, because the moment that your health is gone, right, it's really hard to even show up. So, all right, well, thank you guys both for coming on and sharing just a bit of your story. I know we kind of just scratched the surface. There's so much more to uncover here. Where should people go to learn more about everything that you and CannDelta have going on?
Yeah, they can definitely check out our website, CannDelta.com. Feel free to take a look at there. We've got great presence on LinkedIn as well, and definitely on YouTube. So if you put CannDelta into YouTube, you'll get a ton of videos about everything you need to know about every single framework. And if I could recommend anything to anyone who's looking to start a business in like the consulting space, is really put content out there so that people can find you. And you say something that's of value, they'll probably send you a message. So if you like it, send us a note.
We're on all social platforms. So Instagram, X, Facebook.
All right. We'll link all that up on consultingsuccess.com. Thank you again both for coming on.
Well, my pleasure. We've been a long time listener, and being on the show has definitely been a big goal of ours. So it's a monumental occasion for us. So thanks for having us, Michael.
Yeah, appreciate it.